tomorrow, the only show on Indian television where you, the MSME, get center stage. This is ET Now, special daily initiative to give you, MSMEs and entrepreneurs, the opportunity to be front and center on every industry and area that matters to you. Tonight, we are bringing you snippets from a panel discussion that I did in Bengaluru earlier to talk about education, EdTech, and the role of technology, as well as the way forward as part of our MSME Connect initiative, where we travel to 20 cities span India to connect better with you, the MSME entrepreneur. Take a look.
India has 47 million primary and secondary students dropping out of school every year, according to a report by UNESCO. Although India has significantly increased school enrollment in the past decade, millions of children continue to drop out every year. If there is one sector that technology has touched but not transformed completely, it is education.
Thank you all very much for being here this evening. A big thank you to the audience. That just before we started this panel, I was just joking with the audience that for everyone who complains about the Bangalore traffic, everyone's here on time and we're starting on time. Thank you all so much. A big thank you to the Pride Hotels and Resorts for this space this evening. And thank you once again to the panelists for being here to talk about the role of EdTech, the role of education, the role of technology, the opportunities, challenges, and the way forward. So there's clearly technology and there's clearly innovation in the field of education where the use of technology is concerned. But let me throw this question open to the panel. I was just doing a little bit of reading, and statistics for 2016 show that while non-enrollment of children seems to have fallen, the quality still seems to be a concern. The quality of the number of class 3 children who can read at least a class 1 text has fallen 10% from 50 to 40% for the same period, for 2016. Where does the problem seem to lie?
I think we're the largest schooling system in the world. We're very large. And I think that over the past many years, we've done a very good job in terms of getting our young children into school, which means that we have near 98 to 99% enrollment in our primary schools. So that I think we've done very well. But I think the problem that needs to be fixed are twofold in my view. One is out of every 100 kids who get into grade 1, only 44 of them pass out in grade 10, and only 33 of them pass out in grade 12. So our kids are actually dropping out. And they're dropping out at grade 8, they're dropping out at grade 10. So that's something that we need to fix.
But is this an urban-rural divide? Is this a public and a private school divide, perhaps, that we are talking about?
Not really, Sunanda. I think that while it might be correct to say that in urban agglomerations, we might have the pass-outs in that sense, that might not be an issue per se. But I think this is across, right? We know about the PISA test that India took, and we scored right at the bottom, right? And we never took that test again there. So it's actually universal in that sense.
I just want to pick up on that and talk to the two of you about how technology is being used today. In fact, let me ask the two of you to comment on just how much of your revenues are coming from non-metro cities. Because the real problem in education, and correct me if I'm wrong, is how to be able to reach the last mile, how to be able to reach, the non-English speaking villages, towns, etc. So how much of that right now is coming from metros? And how can technology be used to bridge this gap? How can it be used for the last mile?
Since we are helping connect tutors and students for outside school learning, we're primarily operating in the major cities. That's where major business comes from. About 60% or so will be there. But if you look a really, really long tail, there are 100 cities where tutors are using the services and finding students online.
So as far as Vedanto is concerned, it's a purely online platform. So it's tilted towards top 10 cities, or probably the top 15-20 cities as of now. But as Rakesh said, I think the phenomena we also observe is pretty similar. So minus the top 15 cities, we have a long tail of 380 cities from which sessions happen, right? And so that sort of gives you an idea about Although the potential right now is 60-40 in terms of a revenue split, which Sunanda, you asked, but I think it also showcases the kind of potential and the aspiration which is there in that long tail, and that's a big opportunity for all the educational companies to harness. Coming back to the second part of the question, I think in India we have a last mile problem, right? And I think using technology is the only way we can, as a country, address that. Physically going there and setting up infrastructure and then ensuring a teacher actually reaches there is a huge problem, right? So I read a report somewhere that we have a requirement of almost 1 million teachers, right? And how do you, bridge that gap is a huge challenge. So I think infrastructure, if we focus on that and then use technology and education in technology can bridge that gap, and that's, I think, is an opportunity which we need to be looking at.
Okay. So are the solutions which are required then for small town India, for rural India, very different when it comes to education and the role that education needs to serve? Because we're clearly seeing enough education happening, but that seems to be largely in the English-speaking tier 1 metro kind of areas. Is there enough innovation happening which is then reaching this last mile? And just to pick up from where you left off, Ansi.
So that's pretty much a subjective question. Is enough innovation happening? I think there is. If you look at recently the kind of companies and the challenges and the problems these companies are acting on, and even the big corporates, the way they're adopting technology and EdTech and educational technology is very inspiring, to say the least. And government is also doing its bit in terms of providing the infrastructure support. Long way to go still, but I think yes, there is good enough innovation happening. There needs to be a difference in the kind of approach required to target the bottom of the pyramid as compared to satiating the needs which is required in the top 10 cities, because the challenges are different, right? So yes, there needs to be companies which needs to pick up their problem areas, because education is a very big sector. There are 250, 260 million kids studying just in K-12. I'm discounting the higher ed part here, right? So it's such a big area. So companies need to be very focused on what's that area. They need to focus and go about systematically solving that bit.
Our higher ed online population is probably around 60% of it is the non-metros, right? And the way we, like the last mile problem, one of the significant barriers to digital adoption is the connectivity. So whenever what we figured out is most of the non-metro population, the only device of access is the mobile, right? So we had to reinvent everything only mobile and make it completely offline, so that the period where they have good access, they would download content on their mobile and they'll continue to pursue. So I think mobile as a great disruptor in that in this rural urban bridge can be a great bridge to kind of enable the solutions for rural India as well.
So I will come back to the mobile, and I want to also talk about the role that the vernacular language plays, with access to the mobile. But Vamsi was talking about government, and I love talking about the role of the government. I love debating on what is the role of government, no matter what the industry. And since the two of you have been in this field for so long, what is the role of the government today when it comes to education? What should the role of the government be, especially given the fact that we have models like, say, Finland, where the entire education system, the entire access to education is free, and you're seeing the quality of education in those countries. So what should the government's role be?
Typically, when you ask any K-10, K-12 provider about the role of the government, he'll actually say, undergoverned, over-regulated. That's really the, that being said, I think there's so much more that, of course, the government can do. Just a piece of statistics which could probably, our total spend on education is about 80,000 crores. Out of the 80,000 crores, so 80,000 crores is about 3.75% of our GDP there. Should we be spending more? There might be a case to say we should be spending more, because countries like Brazil and the rest spend as close to 6%. But that's one part of it. But the second part of it is about, when you look at the elementary education, we spend closer to about 22 to 23,000 crores on elementary education. Out of the 23,000 crores that get spent, 75% of it actually is spent on infrastructure and teaching salaries. So only 1% then is left behind for...
Isn't that necessary though?
Absolutely. And I'm saying that that is required because 10%, so we had RT, right to education, and because of RT, the norms started improving. But if you were to look at all the schools in this country, only 10% of the schools would probably conform to RT standards there. So the government has to go out there and fix it. But I think it needs a little change in terms of mindset around not just the input per se, but what really is the outcome. Because we can keep spending the money, because the answer to quality is not about spending more money on benches and chairs, more teachers, more textbooks, but it has to be something more than that there. And for the very first time though, in the National Education Policy, which was a draft copy, for the very first time there was an emphasis of learning outcomes. While that draft is, now there will be a new committee which has been formed, but for the very first time, somebody spoke about learning outcomes. And I think that's probably most required. I think we must stop this fascination probably about just being fascinated about inputs, but worry more about the outcomes of saying, is learning happening? And that's what is probably critical for the government also to measure.
I think the very fact that you have a class does not ensure outcomes, but also ensure that the teacher is actually present and is fairly competent to learn, so to deliver learning, right? So the fundamental ingredients are there. Most of policy is good intention, but what really helps is how well it's executed. That remains to be seen. But I think we have the right ingredients for the way forward. Yeah.
Time for a break here on MSME Connect of an event that we did in Bengaluru earlier, but we'll continue this conversation on the EdTech space on the other side. Just stay tuned. Back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, and tonight we're bringing you highlights from a panel discussion that we did on the EdTech space as part of our MSME On-Ground Connect initiative. Take a look.
There is always the element of social entrepreneurship when we talk about education. About, whether you're making money, whether it should and can be treated as a business, just how much of it should be treated as a business, for instance, in a country like India. So if I can ask each of you very quickly to talk about whether this is a deterrent to really encourage more companies to set up shop, more innovation to really come in, because there's always social entrepreneurship which is sort of attached with it.
I actually very strongly believe that the current school system, I'm talking about K through 12, right? K through 12. Schooling system is actually broken, and there are multiple reasons why it's broken. But with large classrooms like where 50, 60 kids are sitting and trying to understand what's happening, it's very challenging for a kid to get the personal attention that they deserve to be ready for future, because future is changing very, very fast. What they're learning today in school is going to be irrelevant. What they really need to learn is how to learn. And I believe the solution to this is micro schools.
Sort of a different view here. So even before that, personally, I think if you look at some of the things which is happening outside, and there's a lot of stuff is happening outside, and I think education is one of the areas in which I heard somewhere the maximum amount of research has already gone in. So it's one of, if you look at human history, the kind of research which has gone into education, I'm not talking about technology, just education, it's immense. So borrowing from stuff which is happening even outside, India is a very diverse country. It is so huge. Every section has its own requirements, right? And I think for a government to have a standardized framework to attack and solve each and every, such challenges is a tall ask. I think it needs to involve private enterprises and needs to open up the, the playing field for others to come in. Even you look at, Finland, which you were mentioning about the PISA scores, I think that was the country which scored the highest, right? And so if you look at the transformation, it took 40 years for that to happen. And the biggest thing, the result, the biggest, I would say the step which resulted in the whole, the transformation of the Finnish education system was the focus on the teacher. They opened up and brought the teachers to the level of a lawyer and a doctor. Probably not just from a salary output, but from a recognition and the respect output, right? And that is truly what went on, and it took 15 years for that result to show, and which we can see today. I think that learning outcomes, which Prajot mentioned, I think there has to be a benchmark across which all these companies, private or public, needs to be measured on. That is quintessential. Once that is established, right, it doesn't really matter whether the government is doing that stuff or a private player is doing the stuff. We should invite more and more such experiments to happen, and whoever is able to achieve that learning outcome improvement, needs to come in, because India needs that, right? And I truly believe that we can do a lot good if we can have more stakeholders coming in, innovating towards an output, which is probably a learning outcome improvement, and I think India can benefit from that.
I echo the same views that Vamshi said on private enterprises as well. And I think that's the government can really benefit from a private partnership as well. Very recently, the Rajasthan government opened up 300 schools for private partnership as well. So I think the government of the day is also realizing that, but I think we still have a long way to go in terms of the whole thing about for-profit and not-for-profit within the K-12 and the higher ed. We have some distance to go, but I think there are some openings being made in PPP formats.
Balaji, you were talking about the use of the mobile and how the mobile is increasingly going to become so much more important when it comes to education. Innovation in terms of using vernacular, using multilingual, do you see enough of that happening? Do you think that's going to pick up?
Yeah, for example, we also have a enterprise training business, and one of the things, and there again, it's like 150,000 users all across India kind of a scenario. And there, every training is multilingual, right? I mean, and India is like a rightly subcontinent, so every training video is on multilingual languages of the same version of the content, and also learning content and so on. So multilingual is certainly absolutely required for you to cover the breadth of this country. And the second one about mobility is that it's always available, and given the penetration and adoption of social channels, whether we like it or not, that is kind of indirectly attributed to internet availability on phones. So albeit even a slower speed, if you're connected to the internet, you could offline stuff and learn as you go. And because using a mobile phone, you can kind of see what are the learning patterns and what are the time of the day the person learns and so on. You are able to kind of gently nudge the user to say, send him a push notification and say, hey, why don't you complete this lesson, is past due. Those kind of direct connection to the learner is enabled by mobile.
Prajot, you were talking about the outlay on education. When you compare it with GDP, we were talking about some of the global models. I want to know, can Indian entrepreneurs in the education space learn anything from those global models, or are the solutions and the challenges and the problems and the innovations therefore in India very specific to India?
When you think about our schools, and like I said, we run K-12 schools, the two things that we do, and we do it very well, one is the digital classrooms there, and we really think that digital classrooms has helped, because in terms of reinforcement of the concept, the video format is a good format, and now we have 3D enabled format as well, which means that imagine a concept like photosynthesis, mitochondria, very difficult for a child to visualize, right, what it is. Imagine that you see it and you have great 3D models in that there. The second is, and I think it's really worked very well for us, and I can say it from my own experience, we've got 500 classrooms which are fully digitized there. In addition to that, on the mobile, we have a parent communication tool which is called the Web Genie, where every parents can get information on a daily basis there. Because earlier the whole point was that classroom is like a black box. Nobody knows really what's happening in there. So we said, let's just go out there and communicate what we do. And then they will see the effort that we are making. So I think technology in that sense has a definite role to play within the classroom and out of the classroom as well.
So I want to ask you, Rakesh, the cost of using technology and how entrepreneurs can innovate enough to ensure that the cost of technology is brought down, and therefore the use of these tools for outside of metros and tier ones, and going back to what I was saying earlier, then becomes more widespread.
I think in general, the cost of technology is coming down every year, right? So it's becoming cheaper to build technology and deploy technology. Now, in terms of making this technology available for tier 2, tier 3. I think for higher ed, it's an absolutely essential tool to give them access to content and material, because at that age, the child is now aware and, versus a kid who was, still in the school and, giving technology in their hand. But in terms of cost, the cost is, is coming down over time.
All right. Vamsi, you were talking about the role that teachers play and the quality of teachers which are available. I do know a few private institutions are working in the area of training the trainers, educating the teachers. Is enough of that happening? Is that a big opportunity that entrepreneurs in the education space should be tapping? Do you see enough of that happening? What do you think is holding them back?
Oh, huge. I mean, Sundar, I think it's a foundation on which the whole education system needs to be built on. And I think every enterprise which embraces teachers as the core component has a strong investment in the training the teachers part. I think I was just mentioning before in this discussion itself, we have a requirement of, I think, close to 1 million, teachers. And, the only way you're going to produce that kind of a number is everyone, putting their head down and investing and probably, doing that. Coming back to the role of technology and how educational technology can actually help that. So both the things, in fact, there are quality teachers available in tier 1 and or a metro, and if you ask them to go to a rural school and go and teach there, although there might be a motivation, right, to do that, many of them may or might not choose to do that. But in technology, if you can probably provide them, an infrastructure in terms of an internet bandwidth and probably an audio-video tools, they can probably be teaching rural schools, right? And many of those experiments are happening, and I see that's one of the areas in which the last mile problem of India can be solved. In second terms, technology is there are great things which are happening. Magically is what Prajot talked about. I think, so even at Vedantu, what we do is, we have inputs to the teacher, like Rakesh was telling, we also empower the teacher to take meaningful decisions on the level of a child. So in an online, we know exactly how is the child responding. Is he smiling? Is he not? Right? Is he nodding his head? These are all signs of engagement. So imagine if we tell this to a teacher that in your class, these 10 students are not engaged and this 15 guys got it, and you should be concentrating on this specific student on this particular aspect. These are the kind of things which technology can enable today and bring about more personalization. And these are the areas probably where technology can really help.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here tonight to talk to our audience. Thank you very much to the audience. You've been very, very engaging and engaged. I do know there are a lot of other questions. Please do take it up offline. In the interest of time with our panelists, just a quick word of mention as I'm winding down. I have to thank our sponsors. Our title sponsor, Capital First. We're supported by the MSME Department of the Government. Also, a quick mention to hospitality partner, the Pride Hotels and Resorts, and of course, the SME Chamber of India. Thank you so much.
Completely out of time then on this episode of Leaders of Tomorrow. If you want to invite us to your city or you have any feedback on this panel discussion, you can always write in at leadersoftomorrowtimesgroup.com. On social media, tweet at me at Sunanda_J, LOT_ET now, or reach us on our Facebook page, Leaders of Tomorrow on ET now, or you can also call us on that number you see on your screen. We love hearing from you. Thanks so much for watching. Have a very good night.